Before we bring on any of our illustrious guests, we have a couple stories of note for business owners in the state. Our stories this week are taken from the Enterprise Business Journal. To learn more about any of these stories, head to slenterprise.com. Qualtrics, a Provo-based company, is launching a massive $45 million expansion that translates into 2,245 new jobs here in the state of Utah. These jobs will have an average salary of $87,000 per year. Qualtrics has grown significantly since opening their doors in 2002 and have offices in Seattle, Chicago, and somewhat randomly in Dublin, Ireland. This expansion is news for other business owners in Utah because Qualtrics was approved for a $32.8 million tax incentive by the state over the next 10 years, contingent on that promised job creation. From 2002 to 2012, Qualtrics only grew to about 200 employees, but in the last 7 years, they have grown to over 3,000 employees and are looking to double that growth with this new expansion effort. In the 2019 Planning Packet Survey released by the Employers Council, it shows that the average Utah employer is planning to give employees a 3% raise in the next year and a 5% raise to top performers. So if you're not planning on providing a similar raise for your employees sometime in 2020, you may be at risk of losing your best people. Salaries don't tell the whole story of employee retention, of course, but they can certainly tip the scales, especially if there is a significant difference between what the employee is receiving now and what they could receive by switching companies. The average anticipated pay increases in Utah are comparable to surrounding states, with Arizona and Colorado at 3.1% and Arizona anticipating an average 5.4% pay increase for top performers compared to Utah's 5%. Utah is getting another ski resort, but this time with a twist. Woodward Park City will offer skiing, snowboarding, and tubing in the wintertime, but in the summer it will offer mountain biking and a massive indoor facility for skateboarding, BMX, scootering, parkour, cheer, and oddly, digital media. Not really sure what that means. This additional ski resort comes after a banner ski season last year, which recorded a record-breaking 5.1 million skier days, which shattered the previous record by a full 12%. Economic spending related to skiing also set a new record, almost reaching $1.7 billion for the season. To put that into perspective, the entire tourism industry in the state is just over $9 billion. So skiing is a major player in our state economy.
All right, our first guest this week is going to be Joe Rangel with To Evolve Coaching, back for another thought-provoking conversation. And we're going to pick up a little bit from where we left off last week. We kind of went all over the place last week, but the central theme was nuance and why we make the decisions we make, and some of the distinctions there. And so I know Joe has a very specific thing he'd like to get started on, which is the brain physiology. Is that right, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, so what would you like to say first off?
Well, just some of the things that we've been talking about, specifically like systemic or polarized thought processes. There's a real reason that those things happen. And so I thought it'd be kind of beneficial for the audience, and perhaps you, to learn a little bit about why that happens. And it actually starts off with a very small gland in the brain that creates a fight and flight kind of feeling. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk a little bit about that so that people can understand why we all can behave irrationally at times.
Awesome. Is it the medulla oblongata?
No, but it sounds similar. It's another Star Wars type name. It's the amygdala.
The amygdala.
And I want to say it was about 15 years ago, but probably longer, but a book came out called Emotional Intelligence by Dr. Dan Goleman, and he's done most of the work on what's called an amygdala hijack. And what happens is when we get caught off guard by something, which is an emotional, like you had mentioned before, it's an emotional response. When we want to hit somebody, it's usually not logical. When we want to get into a disagreement, it's usually not logical. It gets caught up in emotion. And so what he found is just this little gland can actually hijack your brain. And once it grabs hold of you, it creates a fight or flight feeling. So it can actually cause you to completely forget logic, completely forget what you want to do. This is where crimes of passion can come from. You know, there can be deeper reasons, deeper mental illnesses, but you know, a normal lucid person can get completely blindsided by this emotion. And you know, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but you can probably think back in time and go, wow, I remember a time where I said something that was completely irrational, or I got in a fight with somebody I loved, or, you know, maybe I was ornery with one of my kids or whatever. And in the moment, you're like, gosh, I could have done that maybe a slightly different way once you can step through that moment. But what happens is that little gland actually starts to rob blood and oxygen from your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's the executive decision-making part of your brain. So it's the one that wants you to grow your business, you know, manage your schedule more properly, be nicer to people, find a more balanced way of doing things. Anything that you would aspire to do or be comes from that portion of the brain. And they found in recent studies that it can actually pull away from your oxygen supply, your blood supply, and start to diminish your reasoning ability by sometimes as much as 50%.
Wow. Well, I see why they call it hijacking.
It is. It is. And if you can catch it before it starts to grab you, so there's signs, like, you know, you'll start to feel tense in your neck or tense in your chest, or, you know, some
Flushed,
people,
maybe
flushed. Some people can feel it in their head. Some people can feel it in their stomach. You'll start to feel a sign like, I'm kind of attached here to something, and I feel my temperature rising, you know, emotionally. And you'll start to feel it. If you could catch it and step back right then, you can usually stop a full-blown hijack from taking place.
Okay.
If you're in the midst of a hijack, it becomes almost impossible until the blood goes back to your prefrontal cortex, until it kind of releases. And it's all based on fear. You know, he kind of coined a phrase called fear central. It's based on that in the brain. We get afraid of things. For the most part, we get afraid of things that are not logical. Like we start worrying about, you know, what do people think of us, or somebody said something bad about us, or we're not making enough money, or somebody disagreed with an opinion and we somehow think that they're belittling us as a person, when it's just a difference of opinion, kind of like we talked about on the last session. And once that starts to happen, and once we get attached, it's pretty impossible to get out of it. And it'll have to work its way through.
I see. So what's the remedy then? How do you prevent something like that from happening?
I think if you can start to learn to be consciously aware. You know, you mentioned something on the last session about, you know, that kind of the older we get, I think the more stable we get. I think that's very true. We start to get to where we're not as polarized, where we start to realize that there's better ways of dealing with things. And then once we can start to be more consciously aware, we can make that shift. We can go, okay, hang on, this is not going to go well, you know, and it can be just a conversation, but it can become a very heated conversation with somebody that you care for dearly. And most of us get affected by things closest to home. So we'll tend to treat our kids, our spouses, significant others, you know, parents, siblings, it kind of radiates outwards. Those will tend to be where we get most caught off guard. Because in the public sense, in the public forum, we wouldn't treat somebody that way. We're more aware of our conscious thought processes. Most people wouldn't. Like you had said earlier, when you're younger, you might throw a punch, you know. I might have done the same thing. You know, the week prior to me not wanting to get a fight, I wanted to get in a fight with a guy that absolutely did not deserve it. But it was all over me doing something really silly to him, and him having an opinion about it, and then coming at me, and that's what happened. Hopefully as we get older, we can go like, hang on a minute. There's a different way. But if we can catch it, it can happen to any of us. And then something else that can happen is you can get into what's called an emotional, an emotional sympathetic hijack, where you'll bring other people. So it's kind of like commiserating. So you'll get hijacked and then try to get other people to support your hijack. And that's extremely detrimental to yourself and to other people.
You know, it's interesting because as a youth, I had a pretty bad temper. And I made a complete idiot out of myself on multiple occasions because of that temper. And so consequently, I learned pretty young that losing your temper never works out.
Right.
It never helps. Losing your temper never helps.
Think about that phrase, even that, because temper is about temperament. We call it temper, but it's how we are, you know, it's our temperament. Like we could use that same word and expand it into temperamental, right? But we don't lose our temper. We mask our ability to reason with our temper when that happens. So more than likely when you were younger, you were having consistent hijacks, you know, whether it be feeling picked on or feeling like your opinions were better than others, whatever. We don't need to go into that here today.
I appreciate that.
But anyway, anytime any one of us gets into that, it's because we feel like we're polarized and we're right. Like anytime we hit somebody, yell at somebody, we think we're right. You know, you look at all the wars that go on in the world, you know, around there. Luckily, there's not a lot going on right now, but there's still pockets where people are not treated with humanity, with compassion. You look at big things that have happened in the world, like World War II, or stuff that happened in South Africa, and those all started with polarized opinions and ideologies that got blown up out of proportion. And then people die.
Wow. So finding a way to prevent the hijacking from taking place, obviously, that's the number one solution.
Right. And what I teach is conscious awareness, the ability to take a step back and, you know, find a place. Like if you're consciously aware, you can start to feel it. If you're having a disagreement with somebody close to you and you can start to feel your temperature rising, you can teach yourself to step back either physically or mentally. Sometimes it's good to physically step back and go stand in the corner and think for a moment. And that's kind of just figuratively speaking, but to take a step back and say, hey, let me cool my jets a little bit, because I can already feel this conversation is not going to go well. And the more conscious you are and the more aware you are, the more you can feel that stuff happening, and then you can take a step back from it.
I can see why that would be really difficult, especially in a social setting with friends and family.
Yeah.
Because saying something like that, hey, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah.
But it's still awkward.
Yeah.
It's still going to make them feel awkward.
Well, I mean, might save them from getting punched in the nose.
It might, yeah, exactly.
And in some situations out in the world, you know, with polarized thinking about politics, polarized thinking about religion, polarized thinking about sexuality, polarized thinking about sports. Like, I mean, I think we're fairly tame here, but, you know, if you start looking at Europe and soccer, there's people that get killed on the streets, you know, because they like one team over another. That's very interesting to me.
It is.
Although if we live there, we might get caught up in that, so who knows?
Hard to say. You know, I think this is a timely discussion to have because the political climate in our own country is devolving in that direction, I feel.
Yeah, totally. Where usually when you have this happen, you'll completely lose sight of what the whole war started for. You'll forget what was I even mad about. I'm just mad.
And I love the word that you used, polarizing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a very apt description of what happens, is a polarization. The nuance goes away.
Yep.
You know, the understanding that it is okay, you know, just because they feel this way about a very sensitive topic, say abortion, just because they feel that way and I feel this way, it doesn't make them evil. It just, you know, maybe there's something I understand that they don't. Maybe there's something they understand that I don't. I mean, there's all that nuance there, but regardless, it doesn't mean they're evil.
No, it just means they had a different opinion than you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's getting worse and worse.
There are people out there that are psychotic. I can't say that,
sure,
you know, World War II and the Holocaust was a lucid ideology, but you know, there are people out there that are sick, but the challenge is that sometimes they can actually promote that stuff and get other people to follow them. So this conversation could go on for a long time. If you're okay, I'd like to just make sure and let people know that I won't be here next week.
Yes.
And Scott Mckinley is a master coach and a dear friend of mine who works within the organization To Evolve. Will be here next week, and we'll be trading off seats. I don't know if he's going to be here 2 weeks in a row or if he'll be here a week and then I'll be. But he will start to join us on these sessions. So
awesome!
I want you guys to give him a warm, silent, welcome as he comes into the what would you call it?
Studio?
To the studio, into the battle zone. No,
the battle zone. Yes, yeah. I like that.
So Scott Mckinley will be here with you guys next week, and I know it'll be a lot of fun to hear from him.
Awesome! I'm excited to sit down with him and get rolling on that.
Okay.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
As always. Thank you.
Our next guest is Missy Dennis with FJ and Associates. She's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the accounting issues that small businesses and entrepreneurs face. So Missy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. I appreciate it.
So, accounting. It's not really a topic that most people think is super interesting.
Right.
But it does interest you.
Yes.
Why
absolutely.
is that?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I love to help someone figure out, especially, you know, taxes and accounting kind of goes hand in hand. I love to figure out how to help somebody save money on their taxes. 'Cause we pay a lot of money into taxes. We work very hard. So it's a way to kind of integrate the two and help you and tax plan and figure out ways to put more dollars in your pocket rather than the government.
I'm pretty sure that being passionate about helping other people pay less in taxes guarantees you a spot in heaven. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know that, but thanks.
I hope so. Okay, so in light of that, you know, you take on a lot of new clients. A lot of them are really small businesses. They've maybe never had a bookkeeper before. They've never worked with an accountant before. What are some of the most common issues that those types of businesses have when you first get them as a client?
The first thing, if they're using like an accounting software, QuickBooks is probably the most well-known. There are others out there in the market, but that is one of the most popular. A lot of times we see owners not like kind of putting in their, you know, expenses and income, but they're not really sure what the next step is, right?
Okay.
So you get in there, you always want to go in and reconcile your bank account, right? Because at the end of the day, that's going to tell you if you've missed things or if you've doubled up on things. That reconciliation will tell you if there are some duplicates in there.
Gotcha.
Because we've seen it where somebody has entered in a deposit twice. Now this hits revenue twice.
Gotcha.
And now you're doubling up on your revenue. That's one of the most common things. So yeah, there's one part is putting the data into the software, but the next part is reconciling those.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because that gives you a good picture if you've doubled up or missed an expense in there.
Gotcha.
Without doing that, you would never know.
And so that reconciling basically means taking your bank statement and making sure it's totally in line with
the old thing where they on the back they would have you enter, you know, all your deposits and all your expenses, and you know your starting balance should equal your ending balance. That's a vital thing in accounting, and I see a lot of small owners they just don't have time to do it. You know, because they're trying to run their own business and do that as they should, and it's just kind of the last thing that they want to do. And
you know, for me, and I probably should admit this on camera, but for me, it's always seemed like something that didn't have to be done.
Right.
It was like this extra thing that, oh yeah, it's kind of like buying that extra layer of insurance. Like,
right.
Well, I've got the life insurance. Do I really need the umbrella? You know,
right.
Kind of that sort of thing. So that makes sense, but it is important to make sure. Well, because that could have tax implications.
Very, absolutely.
If you've double counted a couple of transactions, you actually might have higher taxable income than you should. Okay.
Yep.
So reconciliations. Would you recommend those reconciliations being done on a monthly, quarterly basis, annual basis?
I think it all depends how many transactions you do a month.
Okay.
You know, if it's a few transactions a month, you know, you don't necessarily need to do it on a monthly basis. I wouldn't recommend anything over 3 months.
Okay, so at least quarterly. At
least quarterly, because if you wait a year, again, there's no tax planning. I mean, tax planning is, especially nowadays, is such a important thing that needs to be done. If you're not reconciling, you don't have true numbers for your CPA to give you projections and figure out where you're at and plan, right? For all that. So, and if you do it on an annual basis, you may have 1,500 transactions and it's just overwhelming. Whereas if you did it on a monthly basis, maybe you got 100, which is a little more doable.
So that seems like it's like shifting the mindset from accounting is something you have to do. It's like a CYA move. Just, oh yeah, you got to have the books done. And shifting that to more of a, how do I know what decisions to make?
Exactly.
Like this 100%. Is the information that tells me what decisions I should be making.
Absolutely.
So what decisions are fueled by that, by those types of, by accounting in general?
By accounting, I mean, again, it's your cash flow. Inside your, you know, again, your QuickBooks program, you have profit and loss, you have balance sheet. You know, we like to sit down with our clients if they want it and actually go over the report so they understand it. It's kind of a different language. So we like to sit down and kind of educate our clients. I actually love a client that wants to learn that kind of stuff. It like intrigues me. It makes me excited to work on their stuff because they're enthused about it as well too. But also you want to look at cash flow. So you want to, because your cash flow is going to take into some of your debt payments and that sort of thing, where a profit and loss is not going to show you that. So once you get the cash flow, now I can figure out, do I have the cash to, buy more equipment or hire more employees or, that kind of stuff.
So, I know I'm definitely guilty of this, and I'm sure many other business owners are as well. To decide if I can afford something, I just log in and see my bank balance.
Right.
Do I have enough money right there?
Right.
And that actually has bit me in the butt a couple of times. So you're saying this cash flow, you're using the books is a more consistent, reliable way of making those types of decisions.
Absolutely.
So so kind of the reconciliations would be one of the most common things that you see businesses not doing. Are there any other common things that you run into?
That's the biggest one. The other thing, if you're using invoicing within the program, a lot of times a client creates an invoice and then that payment comes in and that payment doesn't get coded to that invoice. So that creates issues as well. That payment has to be directly coded to that invoice. Otherwise, their accounts receivable is just going to grow and grow and grow if that payment's never coded to that specific customer and reduce that customer's balance.
Gotcha.
So that's another big thing that we see.
So one thing I ran into, this might be related to this, was apparently with a couple of my invoices, I was doing a reconciliation recently, and apparently I had labeled a payment that came in on an invoice as a deposit instead of a payment.
That's your problem.
What?
Right?
How is that different?
Yeah, the deposit, in QuickBooks, then the deposit, you have to go one more step, I believe, to code it to that customer. Whereas the payment will have you enter the customer and go straight to the customer. There's just one more step in that deposit that you have to do.
So when is a deposit the right way to classify money coming in as opposed to a payment?
If there's no invoicing.
Oh, okay. So so it's really just the existence of the invoice that matters.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that was a really hyper-specific question that
No,
probably
it's a great
only
question.
applies to me, but
No, it does not. Like I said, I see it all the time, so
okay.
it's very common.
Do you see a lot of issues with miscategorizing transactions?
There's a little bit. I mean, expense is an expense. Obviously, you want it in the right category.
Sure.
But yeah, there is a little bit of that there, but there's always going to be that. So to me, it's not a huge deal. It's just a quick, phone call or email with your, accountant or CPA or whoever and say, hey, where should I put this, or where do you need to put this? So
Gotcha.
we usually even have like a ask your accountant expense account, and they'll throw it in there, and then we'll scan those.
Oh, that's interesting.
Once a month or a quarter, and take a look at those and put those in the right accounts form as well.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
And
You
it goes
just
both ways.
have
Ask my client or ask my accountant, and kind of
nice.
goes both ways.
That's cool. That makes
Yeah.
sense. One thing that seemed daunting to me is the difference between an asset
Yeah.
and like production supplies,
Right.
or something like that.
Right.
Is there a line, like a value of an object or how it's used that determines whether it's an asset that has to depreciate,
Right.
and all those headaches that, in my opinion, go with that,
Right.
and just cost of goods.
Right. No, very good question. IRS actually has a safe harbor that if for a specific item, if the invoice is under $5,000, you can expense it. Right.
Really?
Right. There's other issues that arise with that, but that is an IRS safe harbor. Typically in my industry or in our company, if something costs over $1,000, usually we put it on as a fixed asset for other filing requirements that are out there, the nasty personal property taxes that you have to pay as well, because those need to be accounted for on that, unfortunately, with your county. But so our safe harbor is usually about $1,000. We'll put it on as a fixed asset. But we can immediately write it off for you too. Again, all sorts of IRS rules that we can bonus those, and we can still take 100% of those write-offs in that year that you purchased it.
Sure. Are there advantages? I mean, if you have the choice between doing it as an expense, just expensing it out, or depreciating it, are there advantages one way or the other?
There's really not, other than that county personal property tax report.
Sure.
It's just easier to find those assets as a fixed asset rather than scan a whole profit and loss to try to pull out those items that may need to be reported on there for you.
Okay. So on that, the county, the personal property tax, is that there's a question I've always had, which is it seems really geared for small businesses that only exist within one county. So when you're talking about a national or a global company that happens to have headquarters in a specific county, do they do that same process?
I would believe, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, with their they probably have an office location, right? So on their, every county is probably different, but on their county statement, you're going to have desks and computers and servers and all that kind of stuff that are going to have to go on there every quarter. Is
that done like every county that they have a physical presence in, or every county that they service?
That would be every county they have like an office in.
Okay, but it would only be that office.
Correct.
The things that, oh my gosh, that sounds
right.
Like a lot of accounting.
Yes.
Keep track of,
yes.
Okay, all these expenses that have to do with just this location. And
right.
Then, okay, yeah, that's...
Yeah, those I don't like those either, but...
I don't think anybody does.
No.
Okay. So the reconciliations.
Yes.
And then you mentioned transactions. Wait, what was the second issue?
The second issue was transactions being recorded properly, right?
Right, yeah, okay, yes.
And then cash flowing it, just, up-to-date books to make sure you can cash flow, some expenditures that you may want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, this was very interesting for me. It was educational for me. I really appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
And if people have additional questions, they want to learn more about what you do or see if you can help them with their business finances, what is the best way to contact you?
Best way is FJ & Associates. Our phone number is 801-455-7987. Okay. And we're happy to help and do whatever we can for you.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
You bet.
I'll see you later.
Thanks, Sarah.
Our next guest is Emmalou Penrod from Hypnosis for Motivation. Going with our theme of sharpening the axe or sharpening the saw, finding ways to get to the next level, we're going to talk about how hypnosis can actually help you get there. So Emmalou, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me come.
So I guess my first question to you is, what exactly is hypnosis?
Well, hypnosis is just an altered state. Have you ever had the experience when you were so absorbed in a task or maybe a TV show or reading a book that someone had to shake your shoulder to get your attention?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's an altered state. Or have you ever driven to a place you go to all the time and your mind is mulling something over and the next thing you know you're there?
So it would be kind of like hyper-focused?
Hyper-focused. The basic idea is that you're bypassing the conscious mind, accessing the subconscious. The subconscious is actually the biggest part of your mind. It's like the iceberg. The part of the ice you see above the water is your conscious mind. Everything underneath is your subconscious. So in a state of hypnosis, you are bypassing the conscious mind, accessing the subconscious, and you're always in control. For example, when you're driving, if a car suddenly pulled in front of you, you would immediately come out of it and be alert and aware and be able to respond.
Interesting. So it's not so much the things that happen on the stages where they dangle the gold chain.
You are always in control. All hypnosis is just self-hypnosis. So what you see in the stage show is participants who have volunteered, who are cooperating with the hypnotist and agreeing to do those suggestions. Now, I know because I volunteered one time, and I remember listening to the suggestions, and there were some I was willing to do, and there were others I thought, I'm not going to do that, and I didn't.
Interesting. So you're always in control. So how can that state of hyper-focusedness or that altered state, what is the value of putting yourself in that state?
In business, there are several benefits. One is relaxing, stress management. Would you say that owning your own business is somewhat stressful? Yes.
Not at all. Yeah, of course it is.
Okay, so learning how to manage that stress.
Okay.
Are there times when you need to be in control of your emotions?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it's also being aware of your emotions, knowing how to use them, how to release them when they're no longer beneficial. And, you know, I think I have several times had the experience when I had a problem that was just stressing me out, mulling it over, can't think of anything else. But when I could get myself into a relaxed state, the solution came. So sometimes just knowing how to relax, knowing how to manage your stress, bring your emotions down a notch when you need to.
So what's the difference, so what would be the difference between, you know, kind of just maybe sitting in a quiet room and trying to breathe for a little while and actual hypnosis?
Well, the main difference is quieting that conscious mind, because I've heard, and I've experienced myself, when people try to meditate, quite often it's that quieting their thoughts. They're thinking, oh, I need to remember to do this. And I hear a sound, what could that be? And, you know, I'm worried about this might happen tomorrow. So the self-hypnosis is you're quieting that conscious mind. You're tending your focus to access your subconscious, which is like a big computer. You want to find something you're looking for, or remember something you have forgotten. You have a database infallible. Your subconscious remembers everything that's ever happened to you. When you can access that, you can remember. Studying for a test.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like there are a lot of cognitive benefits to doing hypnosis.
There are.
So, if someone was interested in starting to utilize hypnosis for their business, what would be the first step that they would need to take?
One would be a consistent practice. Dedicate time, morning is usually best, to just relaxing. Maybe just focus on your breathing, or pick a point on the wall and just focus on that, or focus on one of your senses. And just that discipline of being able to quiet your conscious mind and relax. Athletes use hypnosis frequently in improving their performance. Your professional golfer will spend days visualizing, just closing his eyes and visualizing, dropping that perfect putt, how he's going to stand, how he's going to hold the club, the whole thing. And he will see it so clearly. The subconscious is training the body, this is how it's going to work. And it happens. You could do that with a business meeting. You have a presentation coming up. Practice that, visualize that success, that making that smooth delivery, ending with the perfect close. That's another way. Being able, you know, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So if you can see it vividly in your mind,
your subconscious already thinks it's real.
Your subconscious thinks it's real and works to make it so.
Interesting. Okay, so what advice would you give? So I guess you already kind of gave some, which is, you know, find a time. Start in the mornings perhaps, or sometime during the day where you can just focus on your breathing.
It's very similar to meditation.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people discredit meditation, but there's a lot to it. Try it. Start with that.
Okay. What are there other things that they can do on their own, or would it be, you know, once they kind of do that, is the next step to work with you?
Yes, there's a lot you can do on your own. Just reminding yourself of your strengths. If you're experiencing insecurities, your self-doubt, affirmations, just reminding yourself, having a mantra you repeat, having a theme song. You get into that situation that really causes stress, and in your mind, play your theme song. What song inspires you, gives you courage?
You know, a lot, I do listen to music often.
Yes.
But most of what I listen to is orchestral.
Okay.
And so I don't always know exactly what track I'm listening to because it all blends into the next one. And
but can you imagine that selection?
Yeah.
That just, you can feel it just making you sit up straighter and you're...
Absolutely.
Okay. Then when you get in that stressful situation, hear that song in your mind that gives you courage, that helps you be more outgoing. Say you're in a networking. Well, maybe you don't have this problem, but some people struggle to network. They're not naturally extroverted, but they know it'll benefit their business if they can do it successfully. They can play that theme song in their mind as they're in there, and so they're stepping out, ready to shake hands, introduce themselves. They're feeling confident. They're standing in their power.
And that's hypnosis.
That's a form of it.
A form of hypnosis.
Yes, yes. And now sometimes you have the situation where you need some outside help. Maybe it's sometimes when you're too close to the problem, you need another perspective. And this is where working with a consulting hypnotist can be very beneficial. Say it's, a lot of times there's an initial sensitizing event. Some instance that happened maybe in early childhood where, because children believe everything adults tell them. So if there was a situation where the teacher became angry with Johnny and impatient and said, he'll never amount to anything, and he believes it. And he carries it with him. He may not even remember the incident, but he remembers that feeling. And so anytime he has a chance to progress, he'll find that he self-sabotages. It's like, no, I'm programmed not to amount to anything. So a consulting hypnotist can help them revisit that event. As a mature adult, explain, help them understand. I read a quote recently that as traumatized children, we always hope that we'll be rescued. We don't realize it will be ourselves as adults
that rescue us.
And hypnosis facilitates that. They can go back, rescue that child, help them understand teacher was just having a bad day, or maybe she was in the wrong profession.
That's possible.
Yes.
That is possible.
And help them believe in themselves. And sometimes that.
So when someone works with you, is it more session-based where you do the sessions, or is it more as a consulting where you're helping them figure out how to do it on their own?
A little bit of both. Obviously, I provide hypnosis sessions. I also can produce recordings where we take their specific goals, and the purpose of the recording, it's something they can listen to at night just before they go to sleep. So it's implanting these goals in their subconscious. Again, so the subconscious is cooperating, helping it make it happen.
I guess my last question would be, if people would like to get a hold of you to learn more about what you do and how it can benefit them and help them improve their business, what's the best way to do so?
They can go to hypnosisformotivation.com.
Hypnosisformotivation.com.
Hypnosisformotivation.com. That's my website. It has my, they can email me or call me. They can contact me through my website.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, Emmalou.
All right.
This was a great conversation.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.